Thank you, Rabbi.
You're welcome, Matt. If you want to turn on your screens, you can. If you're on your phones, then I understand that. Or if you're not in a place where you can handle um, being on screen, I get that too. Sometimes I'm the same way. There you are. Okay, well, I'll give everybody 2 minutes and then we'll get started. Hello. Okay, we'll get started in about a minute. Okay, let's get started here. If you're able to turn on your screens, great. If not, then that's also okay. I have definitely been in situations where I couldn't turn on my screen. So I want to wish everyone a happy Yom Yerushalayim. Okay. And alrighty. So this class will run for about a half an hour. And I want to talk about what's special, unique about Yerushalayim. Take some time out of our day to reflect on that. Excuse me. And start off just with the history as a miracle, and then we'll talk into why it's so critically important. So 1967, you had at least 5 Arab armies of about 500,000 soldiers, and they were intent or radicalized, motivated, um, chomping at the bit to go ahead and destroy the Jewish people less than a quarter century after the Holocaust. Um, and the only way Israel could win was through a preemptive strike. And despite only having half the number of troops, half the number of planes, fraction of tanks and everything else, they were able to win. And not only were they able to survive, but they were able to thrive. It was a reversal of incredible proportions. And some even observe Yom Yerushalayim, even though they don't observe Israel Independence Day, because the miracle was so undeniable in 1967. And we went from an extreme negative to an extreme positive, which I'll explain in a moment, that they don't even say Hallel on Yom Ha'atzmaut, but they say Hallel on Yom Yerushalayim. So there are different opinions, but just we should be aware of that there are rabbinic opinions that say today is even a greater day than Yom Ha'atzmaut, Israel Independence Day. The 28th of Iyar is a day of miracle superseding the 5th of Iyar. It's an incredible thing. Now, what do I mean by going from negative to the positive? So the uh, the the Arab armies in 1948, Jordan essentially blocked the old city of Jerusalem from being they kicked out all the Jews, ethnically cleansed all the Jews from the old city and some other places, prevented worship and filled the streets with filth near the Kotel, where what is now the Kotel. And essentially you had Jews setting up a community, Israel, in Israel for the first time in thousands of years, really, setting up and established a government and formal communities and sovereignty, but in living right next to their holiest city, without opportunity to observe their holiest place of prayer. So not only did Israel physically survive, but they were able to severely hurt their enemies, and then finally be able to thrive in terms of being able to live in Jerusalem. Now, why is it so emotional? And some of you, I'm sure, remember the week that this all happened. I'll recommend probably the best book I read on the topic by Michael Oren, 6 Days in June. I'm going to give some links as well towards the end of the class for additional materials for today that could enhance your holiday today. But why was it so emotional? It wasn't just the miracle of survival going from an extreme negative to an extreme positive, but it's more than that. And hold on a second, I'm having some computer issues. Okay, there we go. So let's talk about Yerushalayim. And the whole premise here that I want to prove during the course of this class or review is that Jerusalem is the fulcrum of everything. Everything turns and focuses on Jerusalem. Jerusalem is the epicenter of all of our lives, even though we're so far away from it, of the entire world, really. So the I have a topic within Torah that I am very focused on. It's one of the most powerful ideas that I've come across. It was taught to me by multiple teachers, and I find it to be incredibly inspiring point that is very relevant to Jerusalem as well. And that is that when a person looks at Torah, you get a definition of holiness, real, palpable, tangible, you know, animate holiness. And you get an insight as to what that is and what that means. Because holiness to the average American is like, what does that mean? It's ephemeral, it's temporal, it's fleeting inspiration, it's something that I feel, it's not something that exists. But Judaism has a real definition, not a textbook definition, not a Webster's definition, but an outline, a map, a description that, in my opinion, is undeniable and it's a life-changing idea. And that is that holiness exists where you have the most amount of expectations and responsibilities and rules. What do I mean by that? Shabbos is the day of the week with the most rules, and it's the day that's the holiest day. All of our holidays are based on Shabbos. In terms of how do we know that it's a special day? Because of the rules that exist, the mitzvahs, the number. So in other words, there's one thing to remember, perhaps from this year, is that the number of mitzvos that apply in a given context will tell you the level of holiness, even though that's a hard word, the level of kedusha. So Shabbos is the greatest example when it comes to the realm of time. In the realm of relationships, it's a spouse, kiddushin. There are more rules that govern how to treat a spouse, then that's why we have betrothal or holy matrimony. They get it from us. Why do we use the word kadosh or kiddushin to say betrothal? Because there are so many rules that govern that relationship and how to set up that relationship that it's a holy relationship. That's where it comes from. And the same is true, of course, with regards to Eretz, with the land of Israel. Within the realm of the planet, of real estate, there is one place that has more rules than any other place, and that's Israel. So rules mean, and within Israel, and the reason why Israel is as great as it is, and the reason is because you have within Jerusalem, as we'll get to that the land of Israel is to the world, the analogy, just as Jerusalem is to Israel. Israel has more rules and more holiness relative to the rest of the world, and Jerusalem has more rules and more holiness relative to the rest of Israel. So it is the key to our relationship, our namesake Israel or Jacob. That's where the relationship started, and of course the Beis Hamikdash. And we're going to get to a lot of this, but suffice to say, I believe, why were there so many people crying with joy? And whenever I talk about Israel, I get emotional. But why are there so many people that are so happy on this day about this miracle in particular? It's because of its connection to Jerusalem itself. And Jerusalem is on a whole different plane, no pun intended. Okay, so there are what we've described so far is that there are so many more rules that apply to Jerusalem than anywhere else. Rules and holiness go together. When God gives us rules, it's not to be onerous. It's not to be restrictive. It's to tap into our potential. And I said this in a different class recently, but I'll say it again here. I work at a local Catholic hospital. When I first got there, they were everybody got together at the beginning of the session every day, beginning of work, and we would have a meeting. At the end of the meeting, we would have like a little chant or a refrain that we would say. And one of them was, "Where are we? We're standing on holy ground." And I would always, as a conscientious objector, so to speak, I wouldn't say that, because if every piece of land is holy, then nothing is holy. So you have to have distinction, real distinction. So if I treat my spouse the same way I treat everybody else, I know it's hard, but if I treat my spouse the same way I treat everybody else, you know, then that makes that relationship less special. It's not holy. if I hug and kiss somebody else's spouse, then what's the difference between my spouse and there's if I go ahead and build a Beis Hamikdash in Richmond, Virginia, then what is the holiness of Jerusalem? Holiness and rules and regulations go together, and they're not when they come from Hashem, they're not meant to be restrictions. They're meant to be opportunities for us to tap into our potential. That's what Jerusalem represents. That's why we're so passionate about it, because when we were able to access it fully and free it and have independence and and emancipate the city from our enemies, we were able to access and tap into that potential. So Jerusalem is in itself a lesson, a paradigm of holiness. And that's the suggestion, and that's why I think it's such a powerful day, and why I think for us to flourish spiritually, we need to think about what Jerusalem means to us. And I'm going to get to that point now. One of the mitzvos, and again, the whole theory of this whole class is that there are more mitzvos in Jerusalem than anywhere else, and that means something for us, and why you and I need to study that and think about that and consider that thousands of miles away, because it's very relevant to who we are in our spiritual identity. So I heard this in the name of the Chavetz Chaim, Rabbi Yisrael Meir Kagan Zatzal, and he said he never met the president of Poland, but it's been described to him. There's been, he's seen pictures of him, or there are many details about him in the newspapers. He saw the newspapers. If he ever were to see him, he'd be able to recognize him. And he says that's a parable in a sense to mitzvos. Mitzvos, we don't know what Hashem is. Hashem isn't physical. We don't know what Hashem looks like. We don't fully understand Hashem. It's too deep, too profound for us. But mitzvos are what we have, that in a sense that adorn Hashem, or a concept of Hashem in a sense. And so we can fully understand Hashem through mitzvahs. So Yerushalayim offers that in terms of the fact that there are more mitzvahs, so more of a conscientiousness about Hashem. When we go to the Kotel, or if somebody feels something when they travel to Jerusalem, when they really, then there is a sense, there is something different about being there versus being anywhere else. Okay, so I'll give further examples of rules and mitzvos that are part of this. Some of them are positive commandments, some of them are negative commandments. So, just like a person can't see. Remember, Moshe asked to see Hashem, and Hashem said no. He gave in, if you remember the verse in the Torah, and said, okay, I'll let you quickly see my back as I pass by, whatever that might mean. Okay, I don't understand what that means in a literal sense, but it means that there's something to Hashem which is off limits to us. And similarly, in Jerusalem, you have higher level sanctity in the Beis Hamikdash, and within the Beis Hamikdash, you have a room that's even a higher level sanctity than the rest of the Beis Hamikdash, and that is the Holy of Holies, the Kodesh Kodashim. And guess what? Nobody was allowed to ever go there, period, except once a year. The Kohen Gadol was allowed to go there. So there are rules. There's an awareness. There's a sense of headiness to it, and the Kodesh Kodashim. And these are part of the rules of having of observing, upkeeping, maintaining the Beis Hamikdash, and having a certain awe of the Beis Hamikdash. These are part of the 613. It's part of the, in a sense, a description of that is meant to refine our understanding of our Creator. So one of the unique aspects that I think helps us understand the full reality of Yerushalayim is that Yerushalayim doesn't belong to anybody. There's no one tribe or one group of people that it belongs to. It's national. So there are authorities that are there because no one tribe should be lording over other tribes in this way, and that should give us a real sense of what we're talking about when we're talking about a city that doesn't belong to any one Jew. It belongs to the entirety of the Jewish people, since the Beis Hamikdash was was built. Now, one thing which we'll talk about are what are the parameters of the city limits of Jerusalem? We might talk about that later. Just to give you a little bit of a sense, the I did recently, I was convinced in the last several years, after many years of not subscribing to this, of a new rule, which is I did go up on the Temple Mount for most of Israeli history. That was frowned upon or discouraged within observant circles, but I spoke to different rabbis about it, and I did go on the Temple Mount. And but one of the things which you have to do is you have to go to the mikveh. So and not only do you have to go to the mikveh, but you have to prepare to go to the mikveh. You have to cut your nails. You have to make sure you don't have anything be as a barrier between yourself and the water, because going to the mikveh is not something which is a custom; it's a requirement. And so you have to follow all the rules of going to the mikveh before you go on the Temple Mount. That's another rule. That's another mitzvah that's related to only Jerusalem, nowhere else in the world. There are rules. The Gemara describes how to walk in the area of the Mikdash. That a person shouldn't be running or jumping around, etc. Those rules, of course, also only apply. There are rules that a nida, a woman who's menstruating, a nida is not allowed to go to the base of Mikdash. Of course, a man, if they are also in a state of impurity, which can happen, is also not allowed to go. That's why they have to go to the mikveh, though. But a woman who is menstruating doesn't have that option. So, in the intersection of the base of Mikdash, non-Jews aren't allowed to go to the intersection of the base of Mikdash. It's not like we're Mecca or Saudi Arabia. Like you're allowed to have people of another religion there in the city, but in terms of the certain intersections of the Beis Hamikdash, there are rules like that when we had the Beis Hamikdash. So, and one of the things that I want to stress here is that even though some of these are not applicable today, we study them because to have a full sense of what Judaism is, or what God is, or what our spiritual identity is, we study these things. Because our intellect is part of us. Only, even if it's academic, nothing is just purely academic, because it should inform a total perspective on what Judaism is all about. So there are parts of Torah that don't seem practically relevant right now, today, in this century, but they are relevant because they give us a total picture of what the Torah is. It's very hard to go ahead and understand Torah unless you understand every aspect of Torah. And part of that means allowing your mind and allowing your Torah study to take you out of being bound by time and place, go beyond time and place, and consider Judaism as it has been, regardless of specific context. So now part of this is, and this is, I think, very relevant to the emotional part of today, of Jerusalem Day, of Yom Yerushalayim, is in Ethics of Our Fathers, Perkei Avot. There's a famous commentary called Avos de Rabbi Nassan, and there he says that 10 measures of the world, that there's a tradition, 10 measures were given to the world of hardship. 9 of them were given to Jerusalem, and 1 of them to the rest of the world. And the moral of that teaching is Yerushalayim is a very special place. It wouldn't be a special place, there wouldn't be so much fighting over it. Not everybody understands what that specialness is, but it is special and it is challenging. And it's not like you free as they freed it in 1967. It's not like you free it once and then it's free forever. No, you have to continue to fight for the freedom of Jerusalem, because it is something which is looked at and fought over, and people don't necessarily understand what's special about it, but they know that it's special, and that's part of it. There's a lot of challenge. I think there's a great book I recommend by a girl who lived in Jerusalem in 1967, before the war, and I think it's called O Jerusalem. and an incredible, essentially, diary of the hardship that did exist. There's a lot of hardship that's related to Jerusalem. Now, the sages tell us when the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, the most and the whole land was ransacked. The most destroyed city of all the cities during the Babylonian and the Roman oppression, was the most destroyed city, and the one that was least recognizable when they were done with it, our enemies, was the city of Jerusalem. Essentially, Tisha B'Av is very much that. It recognizes the fact that hardship and destruction and the difficult history of Jerusalem means that it's special. But Rabbi Akiva laughed when he saw the area of destruction of Jerusalem, because he knew something which is so destroyed is something which must be special. It will eventually be rebuilt and be the greatest, the one that is most focused on. And we see this today, right? The people that is unfortunately most despised, the most hated, the most persecuted, the most oppressed, right? 7.5 out of 9 million Jews ethnically cleansed from Europe, 900,000 out of a million Jews ethnically cleansed from the Middle East and North Africa. Why does this keep happening to us over and over and over again? It's because there is something special about us. Jerusalem reflects the Jewish people and the identity of the Jewish people. There is greatest potential and also the greatest threat, and those two go together. The book of Tehillim, Psalms. So David HaMelech wrote, "Ki b'char Adonai Tzion, evil l'moshav lo," which means, for the Lord has chosen Zion. Zion is another name of Jerusalem, right? He has desired it for his seat. Hashem chose Jerusalem. We have a tradition that of all the cities in the world, Jerusalem was selected, meaning it's the place to pray. It's the place where we are most moved. It's the place that we are most emotionally connected to. It's the place where we again, all of it is because we have the most connection, because Hashem gave us the most rules in this area relative to all the other areas. There's an example. Now part of this is, and I feel guilty about this, is that I cannot share my screen and give you, these are the parameters of Jerusalem. I lived in Mivaseret Sion, the Judean hills, overlooking the city limits of Jerusalem. Most meaningful time in my life, most unbelievable opportunity to sit and study there for 2 years after high school. And there was this big debate that's a little bit comical, but it comes up on the holiday of Purim. Do you celebrate Purim on the 14th of Adar or the 15th of Adar? Right? The only city in the world that's exclusively Purim on the 15th of Adar, as it's practiced today, is the city of Jerusalem. So the legal debate hinges upon, well, can you see into Jerusalem? In which case, then you have to define Jerusalem. So Mivaseret, you had it was on the outer border of the city. You had 2 Jews and 3 opinions, and some said, okay, what you can see actually is a part of Jerusalem. No, what you're seeing is New Jerusalem. It's not Old Jerusalem. So what are the city limits? I don't know. I can't tell you. Maybe somebody wiser than me wants to take a crack at it. But certainly we know the old city is a part of Jerusalem, and that was exactly the part that was denied to us, that we were able to miraculously. Again, we didn't have in mind in June 1967 that this was going to happen. And then we kept pushing our enemies, and I would say Hashem kept helping us win and beat back our enemies until we find ourselves, surprisingly, at the wall. And so this part of Jewish life could continue, and people walked from all over the country to be able. They were shocked, so they were so moved because they understood, either actively or through osmosis, that there's something here about this city that is part of my identity. So part of that, just to give you a sense, that there's something called Sanhedrin. Sanhedrin is the highest level court. It's like the Supreme Court in Jewish law, right? There are 70 judges, 70 elders that sit on the Sanhedrin. There are extremely high level threshold of piety and erudition that's required to be there. But the idea of Jewish law or Torah law is not just like American law. It's taking divine law and trying to help people have clarity on what's required. So they provided this national direction, which underscores the role Jerusalem plays, but also why was it there in the first place? It's because Jerusalem had this potential. And then when it was there, it gave Jerusalem even more meaning. So okay, we have a man-made government that sits in the newer part of Jerusalem. That's very different. We're talking about you and I, our lives every day are wondering, we have doubts, we have issues, we have gray areas. How should we act? And the Torah provides that clarity for us. Well, when the Sanhedrin was there, those scholars and rabbinic authorities, they were able to clarify any doubts that existed. It's a very powerful place. So, like I said, Jerusalem is special. That's why it was there. Jerusalem became more special because it was there. And this is why when people send letters to the Kotel, that's not necessarily something that I'm pushing or saying, but when we stand there and we're close to where the Beis Hamikdash once stood, and we're standing opposite the Holy of Holies, which a person can do today. So then just a few yards away. So then that becomes, people are very moved. Why is it such a tourist point? Because every person understands that it's not that prayers can't be said everywhere. It's not that prayers only go up from Jerusalem to Hashem. It's that people are more inspired because of everything that was just said, whether they know it actively or passively. People know the ideas that we're saying, and so the prayers become that much more potent. The prophet Isaiah in Yeshayahu in chapter 60, he calls Jerusalem Oro Shel Olam. That's what the Torah says. It's the light of the world. It illuminates the world. Yes, it might be referring to the time when King Solomon was there, and every world leader came to King Solomon, to the Mikdash, to learn and to trade and to get wisdom, etc. But that's a reflection of the broader theme that is Jerusalem. That Jerusalem provides clarity. And look, we're in a time right now when the whole world has gone upside down in so many ways, and they say that which is evil is really moral, and that which is moral is really evil. Jerusalem stands as the bulwark against this erosion of morality. That's what Jerusalem we're not. I'm not saying that we're perfect. What I'm saying is that we continue to honor and respect the special nature of Jerusalem even to this day, and that what we think is old and ancient is really timeless and is really as relevant today as it ever has been. So one of the unique aspects of Jerusalem is that there were no road signs for pilgrims to Jerusalem, right? 3 times a year on the festivals, people would go up to Jerusalem, and which also talks about unique mitzvah of Jerusalem. But they didn't have signs. Why didn't they have signs? Because this would force people to interact and speak to each other. And when they would speak to each other and say, "Oh, you're going to Jerusalem, why are you going?" And they say, "Oh, okay, I'm making a pilgrimage." And they'd say, "Okay, I'm inspired now by interacting with you. I'm going to go with you." And then entourages, groups would come and fulfill this mitzvah of honoring the Mikdash, honoring Jerusalem. Okay. Now, there's another part of the Gemara that says 9 shares were given to the world. I'm sorry, 10 shares were given to the world of beauty, and 9 out of 10 were given to Jerusalem. There's a beauty to it, and it's important. I always like to say that you're not going to keep the crown jewels in a brown paper bag. And it's a reflection of the fact that the most precious place we have is not kept in a brown paper bag. It's the most beautiful place in the world. So it's a reflection of the fact of all the special things that we have made reference to, and it is there for a reason. On planet Earth, whatever this might mean, but it is has the capacity for, and you can still see it today, that level of beauty. I'll just say for myself that being in a land that's different than all the other lands, I spent 3 summers, and I'll finish with this personal reflection. I spent 3 summers in Israel when I was 14, 15, and 16. Spent 2 years after high school. I spent a half a year after college. I spent my first year of marriage after graduate school. Um, my 2 years after high school, for me, uh, provided clarity. I didn't I didn't really know who I was or what I wanted until I was in the vicinity of Jerusalem. And I don't think that's an accident. And the level of clarity, the level of clarity that I had then in some ways is, but in some ways it's a great it's greater it's easier to have clarity in Israel, especially Jerusalem, more so than Virginia for sure. But um, allowed me to develop convictions that were able to be, my guidepost for the rest of my life. It's um, and none of that could have happened um, without 1967, without the miracle of Yom Yerushalayim. So it's um, it was incredible to be able to start my marriage and family there. But so many people, I mean, even here from Richmond, we send trips to Israel. We're sending another trip, a solidarity mission next month. People have changed their lives. Um, uh, because of these trips, and because of Jerusalem, and because of what the soldiers through their sacrifice were able to they were able to unleash the power and the energy that we've just spent a lot of time talking about in terms of all the mitzvahs that are relevant to this city unlike any other city. So it's a special day. It's a day of celebration. We said Hallel this morning at our minyan. It's there will be, I'm sure, reference to it tonight. I know I'm giving an invocation at the Federation annual meeting. Auspicious time to have the Federation annual meeting. The RJ Ali, run by Rabbi Cantor, is having their siyum, which is a beautiful occasion. That's at 7:30 tonight at the JCC that my wife helped organize. The Jewish people, we understand that there's something special about Jerusalem, so we celebrate today with great fervor, great meaning, with great gusto, and everybody should take time out of their day to think about how special Jerusalem is. So I'm going to stop here. If there's any comments or questions or feedback, that sounds good. I'm going to give you 2 more links in the chat that should hopefully enhance your holiday. And let me do that now. That's one. And here, this is two, talking about Jerusalem. And a podcast and a YouTube link. And we'll stop over here. Wish everybody a happy Jerusalem day, Yom Yerushalayim Sameach, and hope to continue to celebrate with all of you at the next opportunity. Take care, everybody.